Okay. Okay. Oh wait. Why don't we have a? We don't we need to have a tab to do we need to cover this?
Try that again.
I was like,
You were slipping on the banana peel for a long time.
I was like, all right.
Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd, welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
In our new season, we're stepping back in time and into a neighborhood watering hole to rub elbows with Gen X as they're coming of age, drinking age.
We could be lounging at a dive in Seattle or maybe checking in at a combo bar / cyber cafe down the coast in San Francisco.
Wherever we find ourselves, we'll be here until the band starts passing the hat or we're kicked out for freeloading.
So ask the bartender for a slightly cool Olympia and see if they have any slightly warm pizza rolls.
And pull up a seat between us and the flannel-clad regulars here in the bar. So, Todd, it looks like they're about to pass the hat here in the bar.
Oh,
Yeah, so this reminds me, while the band is setting up, let's recap really quickly with regard to what we've talked about with Gen X so far, and then maybe we
okay.
can
Okay.
jump in and talk a little bit about music. So, for the first episode in this series, of course, we sort of laid the groundwork for what was going on in the late 80s and into the 90s as Gen X was sort of the center of youth culture.
Right.
And then we started to talk a little bit about marketing and trying to persuade people who were not really interested in being persuaded. So that
Who
was
didn't want to be
interesting.
marketed to. Yeah.
Exactly. So here we are, and now maybe we can talk a little bit about music. And maybe that means selling out. Maybe it means not selling out. Maybe it means being authentic. Maybe it means, I don't know what it means, but
What does
here
it
we
mean?
are.
I don't know. We can unpack all that, right? But
Yeah.
that's a great idea. So, as you just said, we've been talking a lot about Gen X coming of age lately, and I happened to get a look at the band's set list tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And why don't we talk a bit about selling alternative? I did air quotes there. Could you hear the air quotes?
Yeah, I did.
Selling
Yeah.
alternative music to those who didn't want to be seen as, again, air quotes, alternative.
Okay, I like that.
All right.
But first, I feel we need to acknowledge the long shadow of Nirvana that's really sort of the backdrop to all this. And
Oh, them again.
and you had mentioned in the last episode when you were talking about Gap Khakis, one of
Yeah,
the
Gap
cornerstone people in the Gap Khakis series was, of course, Jack Kerouac. And I was thinking about him and thinking about the Beats, because the Beats, as we've talked about, sort of had a resurgence during this time.
Yeah.
And I sort of regard Kurt Cobain as the Jack Kerouac of really Gen X. They were both reluctant voices of a generation, and they both battled their own demons, of course, and different forms of addiction. And then, of course, they both were able to capitalize on their fame and at the same time fell victim to it.
Yeah.
So I think we can't have a conversation. So just to tip our hands a little bit, the albums, at least that I'm thinking of, don't involve Nevermind.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So don't involve Kurt, just because that's, I really feel
There's been
that's
enough about that?
Yeah, you think? I mean, it literally killed somebody. So I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. But what else was going on musically at this time?
Yeah.
Dug in my crates, a la our crossover Riffs on Riffs episode, where I was made fun of for having pristine CDs.
Yes, you were.
So I I dug in my crates, my hermetically sealed crates, and I brought along a few albums to the bar, just in case we needed to make some, and now I'm using air quotes here, suggestions to the band. Yes.
Oh, bands love that too. So
They really do.
I think if you make your quote suggestion on like a $5 bill, it gets heard a little bit better. But I like the idea. You do have some good albums, whether they be in digital form or they be CD or whatever form, even vinyl. So there's great music happening then.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
A lot of it was overshadowed by the long shadow of Nirvana. So let's start with what you got and see where this goes.
Okay, I've got my my musical choices spread out on the table here in front of us.
Right.
Okay, so tell you what, let's start with Bjork. I mean, you love Bjork, I love Bjork, the world loves Bjork, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
How can everyone? Yeah, what heartless bastards don't love
an
Bjork?
imp.
Yeah, she's a wood nymph. She's an artist. She's very talented. Let's talk about the album that came out in 1995 called Post.
Post, yeah.
So why this album? What's going on with this? So let's talk a little bit about it. The background here, it's the third studio album, her third solo album that she released.
Oh, okay.
Bjork is a singer-songwriter, musician from Iceland, and she originally came to be well known because she was the lead singer in a band called the Sugar Cubes.
Sugar Cubes.
Yeah. So folks go back and research the Sugar Cubes. And this particular album was released in June of 1995. And the sound is a nod to industrial music. It's techno pop. It's very sort of layered and lush. I really like it. And for people who may think they're not familiar with it, I guarantee you probably are, actually. So songs from the album that listeners have probably heard include Army of Me and It's Oh So Quiet. So those are two singles, and Army of Me is one that I particularly like.
Okay. Well, what was it about this particular album, Post, that came out in 1995? What was it that seemed so iconic to you to bring it up today?
I think we need to start here with the album art.
All right.
So the cover shows Bjork standing on a London street, and her pale skin and dark blowing hair contrast with the vivid colors of all of these Japanese-inspired signs that are behind her as the backdrop. And so there was this British studio, very influential in the 90s, called Me Company. And the designer who helped her out was this guy named Paul White. And he had been a frequent collaborator since the days of the Sugar Cubes. And his idea was to, quote, surround her with giant postcards to represent communication with friends and family, unquote.
So she was on a London street, but surrounded by, quote, giant postcards.
Yeah.
Okay. Japanese inspired.
Yeah, even though she's not Japanese, but it's this idea of distance.
She's a wood nymph.
Yeah,
right?
yes. Well, they probably have wood nymphs in Japan, wouldn't you think? I don't think that's.
Well, she's an Icelandic wood nymph. So
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't think they have Icelandic wood nymphs in Japan, though.
Are you familiar with the whole wood nymph lineage and classification system? Do you have a chart somewhere?
I can't say that I've done that in Ancestry yet, so you might be right.
You haven't spat in a little vial and submitted that. You haven't been to Salt Lake City to see what your wood nymph lineage is. Okay, so the designer has this idea, and then he got a French photographer named Stéphane Sen, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Sednaoui, Sednaoui, and that was he was Bjork's boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
So again, they're in the London street. So you got Iceland, you've got Britain, you've got France. I mean, this is a real United Nations of artistry happening here.
Yeah, Japan.
Yeah, Japanese inspiration. So Me Company designs this artwork, and then inside the booklet, this guy named Martin Gardenier modeled the lotus flower that is used inside and on the back of the album, on the packaging. So there's just a lot going on. Okay. So that is another Asian nod, right?
All right. So the Bjork, the Japanese style cyber word mark of Bjork.
Yeah.
Like, did your friend Stefan do that?
I think Paul White did that.
Paul White
we'll
did
have
that.
to. Yeah, I think Me Company did that.
Okay. Can you describe that a little bit?
Oh man, yeah. It's very sort of dimensional, sort of manga-like. It's sort of this cursive, definitely influenced by kanji, but very Tron-like, very video game-like.
Very modern Asian inspired.
Yeah, we'll post an image of it on the episode page so people can look at it. But it really started to appear on a lot of her singles. So again, if you're familiar with Bjork's work, it has different permutations on some of the different albums, but you're like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. And then let's talk about wardrobe here for a second. So the jacket that Bjork's wearing, shown on the cover, was actually inspired by the Royal Mail, so the British airmail envelopes. And again, this is a reference to the album's title. It was specifically crafted from envelope paper called Tyvek, if you think about FedEx pouches So by a designer named Hussein Chalayan. She got another designer to actually craft this jacket for her.
Nice.
And actually, if you want to go see this, Todd, it's available. If you're willing to go to Reykjavik and you're willing to go to the Hard Rock Cafe, it's displayed
I would
there.
be willing to do both. I'd love to go to Reykjavik and go to the Hard Rock Cafe.
Full disclosure, I've been to Reykjavik, but I did not make it to the Hard Rock. So so I'm taking this on faith.
All right.
Not the Reykjavik part, but there's the Hard Rock is there with her jacket. But it was also part of a 2015 MoMA retrospective on Bjork. And then Vice, the media platform website that we are all aware of, Vice actually identified the airmail jacket look as one of the, quote, ultimate fashion moments, unquote, of Bjork's career.
Okay. So the airmail jacket, obviously, there might be a connection to the title of the album, Post, right?
Yeah.
Post can mean other things, though. So
sure.
When you were digging into this a little bit, did you find out any other meanings behind the title of the album, Post?
Yeah. So Bjork says she chose the title for two reasons. So first, it references the fact that all the songs on the album were written after her move to England. That's why she was in London. She was living in England at the time. And then her prior album was called Debut. And those were songs she had written during the previous 10 years of her life in Iceland. So you sort of have pre and post. So that's a nice pun. And in an interview from 1996, she said, quote, I always knew it would be two albums, and that's why I called them Debut and Post, before and after, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, the title was inspired by her desire to communicate with friends and family back in Iceland. So you're exactly right, this idea of mail.
Okay.
You post a letter.
Huh. Interesting. I find it kind of oddly funny that she used an album to communicate with friends and family back in Iceland when, phones work too. So
telegraphs, carrier pigeons.
I'm going to write an album about this.
Well, I think maybe she was doing both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And originally the album cover was a different idea. It was going to be a photo of her surrounded by these silver balls.
I don't get that.
Yeah. Well, hang on. Because you can actually, you'll be able to, maybe it was pawnbroker's balls, Todd.
Oh, okay. That's what it is.
Yeah. She had to, postage isn't cheap. So she had to sell a few items to be able to talk to friends and family. But this idea was dropped. Like it just didn't, they were like, to your point, like we don't get it. And she decided that the album should be a portrait of her surrounded by important possessions from home. And these possessions were to represent the themes in the album's music: isolation from family and friends from Iceland, as we talked about a minute ago. And so Paul White, our hero from earlier in the story, he suggested surrounding Bjork with massive postcards. So that's where this idea of communication with friends and family came from, through the post. So he sort of, brought this idea to the table, and then she went with it. And going back to this kanji-inspired mark that we were talking about earlier, there were also a series of singles from the album, and Meat Company designed all of those as well. And they're really worth looking at because as they kept doing the work on them, they became increasingly 3D and increasingly CGI looking. So combination of illustration, but also sort of cyber, which really worked into this mark. The mark was kind of, in a way, sort of previewing what was going on. And I want to just take a moment to acknowledge this in like 1996, in the mid-90s, to do this kind of work. I mean, now you shrug and you're like, AI could do this in 2 seconds on my phone, right? But 30 years ago, this took a lot of both computing power and really software knowledge to do this. Like, this wasn't really easy to do. So, and the fact that it was truly done with computers, like it wasn't trickery done with airbrushes or anything like that. Like, it was actually being rendered 100% digitally. So at the time, this was really, really remarkable. So I just want to take a moment to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. And there had to also be a lot of artistry that went along with the computer generated imagery, because it was so new, it was so raw.
Yeah, you really still needed to have your vision and then try to sort of bend the software to your will a little bit, I think.
Right. Interesting.
So the shot of Bjork surrounded by the silver balls, planned as the cover, later appeared in a 1995 article for the British music magazine The Face. So
okay. That's where it came
Bjork got balls in the face after all.
Man, that one, I don't even know. I don't even know if that's worthy of a chuckle. That one.
That's too blue.
How long you been sitting on that joke?
Sorry,
man.
everybody.
Too funny. No, too funny. Well, that's great. No, so did the music? I'm just curious because I'm less familiar with some of her deeper cuts when she was releasing singles from the album post. You said that they visually became a little bit more 3D cyber looking.
Yeah.
Did the singles, the music, become a little bit more cyber, a little more industrial, a little bit more like futuristic sounding?
Well, I know they're remixes. So I think it was an invitation to experiment with different versions of some of these songs.
Yeah.
At this time, again, like we've talked about in past episodes, this was really an era of, again, just like the album art, you had music that really started to be fed through computers in a meaningful way for the first time. So there was a lot more leeway in terms of experimentation. As a result of that, you have a lot more versions of a specific song, a lot of, remixes or alternative mixes or things like that. So these singles that a lot of these artists were putting out around this time, I think they accomplished a couple things. I think they allowed for more experimentation in terms of artwork, like we're just talking about.
Right.
I think it also, for the sort of super fan, it was a value add for them. It gave them something else to look forward to. I think it was also, obviously, for the record label and for the artist, an additional revenue stream. So there were a lot of reasons that these things were being done at the time.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I had at the time, I didn't have the Bjork singles. I had other singles by other bands, and that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it. Like, I had a ton of singles by U2, and they were increasingly more dance oriented, more techno sounding, and I just thought they were alternative mixes, which they were, but I didn't realize how easy it would be for them to create alternative.
Was that like Zooropa era U2, I guess?
It was, yeah. Well, it was pop and Achtung Baby, that whole time when
they were kind of getting more pop and more glam. So
more glam, a little more industrial, but it was alternative mixes and B-sides basically too, like you were just saying with Bjork, and And different producers, they would have different producers like remix the same song, which, up until that time I wasn't exposed to that. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this kind of thing where they were probably, artists in general were like, well, let's mix all these versions and then let's figure out what works best in an album format, right? And then
yeah.
So you sort of have the continuous album, the 10 tracks, 12 tracks, whatever it might happen to be, but you don't just want to mothball these other tracks, I think. So it's a scenario where it's like, well, and kids, keep in mind this is pre-internet. So if you wanted these things to see the world, you had to release them in a physical form.
Yeah, CD single.
Yeah, so CD single or, Ka-single, right? Remember the cassette single?
Ka-single.
Yeah,
oh,
I had
boy.
a few of those.
Yeah.
I bet you did too.
Yeah, I broke a bunch of those.
Your car ate them.
Hey, you know what? So all this talk about Europeans and the Irish even, it's making me want a fancy beer.
Oh, okay. Well, how fancy is fancy?
Something with, some foreign language on a can, maybe a picture of a shield or a musical instrument, a shillelagh, something. I'm willing to spend a little bit more.
You're in luck because the bartender's been putting those on your tab for hours now.
Wait, what? All right. This is a good time for a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters.
Think Ghostbusters.
Iconic images.
Think Bigfoot.
Punk music.
The Ramones.
Saturday morning cartoons.
The Pink Panther.
And failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase "Two Designers Walk Into a Bar."
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. Welcome back, everybody. We got our drinks refreshed. We hope you got your fancy European beers as well with a shield or a shillelagh or something on them. And Elliot was just talking about the album from Bjork titled Post. He's brought a collection of music from the late 80s, early 90s, and we're kind of getting a little schooling on what was happening at that time. So, Elliot, what's next on your list?
Okay, so let's go to album number 2.
Album number 2.
Number 2 on your list, number 1 in your heart. Oh, what are you doing?
I felt like I needed to give, I was like your sidekick. Album number 2 had to be your hype man.
You're like Ed McMahon.
Like your Andy Richter, your Ed McMahon.
Okay.
All right.
Did I win any money, like Publishers
No.
Clearinghouse? You're not going to show up on
Nah.
my front porch with balloons and a giant check.
We probably should just edit all this out.
No one's going to understand what we're talking about. People are gonna
That's
be
right.
like,
That's
"What
right.
the
But
hell?"
please, what?
Yeah.
Please continue with the next album. on your list.
Okay, so thanks for hanging in there, everybody. So the next album on my list is "Doolittle" by the Pixies.
Okay.
So, Todd, are you familiar with Doolittle? Are you
Yeah.
familiar with the Pixies?
I'm more familiar with the Pixies than that particular album, but I may know some of the songs on it.
I am sure you do. So,
Okay.
a little bit of background. Doolittle is the second studio album from the Pixies, quote-unquote alternative, rock band. It was released in April 1989 on one of my favorite record labels for design, a label called 4AD Records.
Oh.
And so just a quick little nugget of background. The Pixies were originally formed by two guys named Joey Santiago and Black Francis. And Todd, I feel like you probably figured out Black Francis is a stage name. It's not his real
What?
name. Yeah,
What?
I know. Hard to
Do
believe.
do you know his real name?
I do, and after I tell you what it is, you'll probably say, "Oh yeah, Black Francis was the better choice." So his
All right,
his
hit me
real
with
name,
his
okay,
real name.
Charles Michael Kittredge Thompson the Fourth.
Yeah, he did go with Black Francis.
Yeah. Later,
Stick
of
with
course,
that.
Frank Black and that whole thing.
Right.
The Pixies were formed in Boston a few years earlier than this album was released, and Black Francis is the primary songwriter here.
Yeah. Now, so I kind of, in my head, and this might be completely incorrect, I put them around the same time period as Smashing Pumpkins, but I think Smashing Pumpkins, they were later, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they were a few years later. I think Smashing. Well, we'll have to go to our crack research team, but just
We'll get
off
on
the
that.
top of my head, I think Smashing Pumpkins released their first album in like '91, maybe.
Okay,
Does
so
that
not
sound-
too long after
Yeah,
that. But
no.
But
I'm
guitar-driven, kind of rock with an edge, a little punk sounding there.
Yeah. So they are definitely pointed at as being an influence by a lot of bands.
Okay.
And their sound is known as sort of loud, quiet, loud. And that's sort of their
okay.
trademark. There's actually a documentary about the Pixies that's called Loud, Quiet, Loud, which I think is a perfect name. They're very indie, very noisy, surf rock, punk rock, but it's also very melodic and beautiful music. And Doolittle is consistently on these best of album lists and often mentioned as being an influence by different musicians, including, again, here's some of the shadow of Nirvana. Kurt Cobain mentioned that they were an influence
makes
of
sense.
his. Yeah. And so this particular album has a lot of offbeat and dark subject matter and references things like surrealism, biblical violence, torture, death, and prostitutes.
Well, yeah, they kind of all go together then, don't they?
They do.
It's a nice one little package there. And as you were saying that, it's like I'm thinking there were other bands that were not crazy off those topics either. Like, it just flew out of my head. Soundgarden was one I was thinking of. Anyway. Please continue. I wasn't adding anything to that.
Yeah. Maybe this is time for another beer.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah, you
Maybe
got to
there's been too
loosen
many.
things up there.
Yeah.
But songs, you mentioned, like, do I know things from this album? Do I know some of the tracks?
Yeah.
Those songs from the album listeners have likely heard of include Monkey Gone to Heaven, Here Comes Your Man, and Debaser. So you've you're hearing melodies at least for one of those songs, I would think, as I mentioned the titles.
You want to sing one of them to
No,
me?
I really don't. But we will do for all of these albums, we will go ahead on our episode page and have links to all of them. So if folks want to hear them for the first time or take a stroll down memory lane, just go to our episode page.
So why did you think this album was iconic then?
Glad you asked. So why do I love 4AD Records? not only for the music, it's like come for the music, stay for the beautiful album art. So this album was laid out by a British designer I'm a huge fan of, named Vaughan Oliver, of the firm V23. And he had a long and fruitful partnership with 4AD, that was the Pixies record label. And his layouts were true works of art, beautiful layering of type and images and textures and lines and symbols. And it was really just beautiful, beautiful collage. And a lot of it was working with great photographers. So the photography for this album was from a gentleman named Simon Lal Barestier, Larbalestier. So my apologies to all the French listeners or Quebecois listeners we have, or anyone else who might be marginally acquainted with proper French pronunciations. The imagery is figurative elements, but is very layered and abstract overall. So according to Vaughan Oliver, what's so great about this photography is that all of the compositing and effects were done by the photographer originally. So this is like in-camera stuff or whatever.
Okay.
Or in the dark room. So, Vaughan Oliver wasn't a big fan of digital retouching. I think he sort of saw it as a little bit of a crutch. And then the production itself, metallic inks, copper and silver, overprinting, textures and layering, including shapes on the front and back covers, knocked out of the ink that are the reverse of one another. I mean, this thing is super sexy. I mean, it is a clinic in design, it's a clinic in imagery, it's a clinic in print production. I just absolutely love it. And during the recording sessions, you'll love this, Todd, Whore was discarded as a potential album title after Vaughan Oliver changed the cover artwork idea to a monkey and a halo on the cover, as in Monkey Gone to Heaven. So, yeah, and again, we'll have this artwork on our episode page, so you can go and take a look at it, and you'll see what we're talking about.
And I can start to see a Doolittle connection with that as well. At least it was an animal, a higher intelligence animal.
Okay, I like this. I like where you're going.
It wasn't a whore. It was an animal that was not a whore.
No, well, I mean, I can't speak to the morals of the monkey. I mean,
it had a halo.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So Black Francis later explained his rationale for the move. Quote, I thought people were going to think I was some kind of anti-Catholic, or that I'd been raised Catholic and trying to get into this Catholic naughty boy stuff. A monkey with a halo, calling it whore. That'd bring all kinds of shit that wouldn't be true. So I said I'd change the title. But he, I won't go deep into his childhood, but he was sort of brought up in this wacky religious household, and he moved around a little bit. So it really influenced a lot of his music. He was into things like numerology, for example. So if you look at the artwork, this monkey also has the numbers 5, 6, and 7 around it, which were a direct reference to the Monkey Gone to Heaven lyrics. If man is 5, then the devil is 6. And if the devil is 6, then God is 7. So you probably remember that part of the song.
Okay. So that is based in numerology then. I didn't know that. Okay. Huh. Interesting. I guess if we add all those up, you get 18, right? Does that mean anything? Are we going to implode or something?
I don't think so. Maybe it was that was the price of the CD. Maybe it was $18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth it then if you've got all that kind of math learning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, this is maybe Pixies or the original math rock. Just like you just
maybe
don't know.
So. Yeah, maybe
just
so. We didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, unwitting fans. They're like, suddenly I know Chinese algebra. So Vaughan Oliver layered a sort of golden section grid over the image to symbolize mathematics and music. So actually there is sort of this visual pun with the numerology, and then of course, like rhythm and things like that. And then Black Francis named the album Doolittle because there's a track on it named Mr. Greaves, and there's a lyric in that song that says, pray for a man in the middle, one that talks like Doolittle.
Oh, that's where it's from. Okay.
There you go.
Right. So the man in the middle is someone who could talk to other species then.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. I want to go with that.
So Doolittle was the first album where, I bet you it's not Simon. I'll bet you it's Simon, if he's French. Yeah, Simon.
La Ballestier.
So Doolittle was the first album where the photographer and the designer had access to the lyrics. And according to La Ballestier, he said that this made a quote-unquote fundamental difference.
Okay.
Probably because they could actually have art that was thematically relevant, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so the surreal and abstract images throughout the album's booklet are linked to the album's content. Okay, I want to give you a few examples here, all right? So let's spread this out here. So we have Gouge Away, and that's represented by a picture of a spoon containing hair laid across a woman's torso, which is a direct pictorial representation of heroin, with the spoon and the hair being horses. So, Todd, as you know, the nickname for heroin being horse. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So the image for As Loud as Hell shows, quote, a ringing bell, unquote, with a set of teeth. And this alludes to the line, "It shakes my teeth," in the song I Bleed. So there we go.
Very Dadaist.
Yes. Right? Very, very Daliist, I think, as well as Dadaist. Yeah. Every artist and movement that begins with the letter D. All crammed into this album. Walking with the Crustaceans is a visual representation of the lyrics to Wave of Mutilation. I'm sure you know that song as well. And La Ballestier later commented that he was interested in, quote, early surrealist stuff, unquote, at the time. So, yeah, it all adds up here. And then these images were actually later released as a series of posters and postcards by the 4AD record label. So that's pretty cool.
That's sweet.
Yeah. So, like, all the hard work actually went into these works of art.
Yeah, so, CDs were doing well at the time. They were doing really well. So I did know that albums of the day, they still had some swag added to it, and you could certainly order more. This sounds like one of those where the digital recording also came with some more interesting visual stuff too.
Yeah, I think this was kind of the era of, again, going back to our Riffs on Riffs episode. Do you remember how I talked about how REM had a fan club, and you could order all this limited edition letterpress CDs and albums and other fun things from them? I think this is that same sort of idea, that even back in this time when music was still a tangible thing, albeit smaller than vinyl, of course, but you could still lay your hands on this extra stuff. There was still value in the craft that came with this extra stuff. And it was really, I think there's some bands that do this now, but I think this was really kind of the tail end, probably began in the 60s or 70s, where bands were really art projects, and music was one output from this group of artists. Like another, not to get too far off topic, but another group that I think of as like a band/art project is the British electronic band Underworld. And around the time of Me Company, going back to the Bjork album, there was another really progressive studio in the UK called Tomato, and they were really doing a lot of interesting stuff with like early web design and multimedia. They were really pushing the envelope and doing things that you would just see and it'd be like, how in the hell did they do that? So they and Me Company were really kind of neck and neck in different ways. But the band Underworld was a couple of the designers who were part of Tomato. And then they came out of there, and then they started, so they do all their own graphics when they're doing their shows and everything like that. Yeah, it's really fascinating. There's just a ton of crossover here. But I don't want to get too far off topic. Maybe one day we'll talk about designers who are also musicians and vice versa, because I think that's a rich list unto itself.
Yeah. That's cool. All right, what else you got?
Okay, I've got one more here.
All right.
Again, I would say I would have to dust it off, but Todd, you know how I keep my music. I don't need to dust it off.
Pristine.
But I'll present it.
Okay.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Right?
Okay,
I mean, this is a very, very, very iconic album in a number of ways, right?
Classic.
So let's talk really quickly about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. For those of you who don't know, they're a rock band formed in LA back in 1983. So it wasn't like they were an overnight success, right?
Yeah.
Their music incorporates elements of alternative rock, funk, punk rock, hard rock, hip-hop, and psychedelic rock. So a bunch of different genres all sort of crammed together, and it really gave them a unique sound.
Yeah.
And while they've had some rotating members through the years, and again, that's another story unto itself. I think they're like biographies and documentaries that these guys have done, so go look those up. The two members that people are likely familiar with when you think about Red Hot Chili Peppers are the singer Anthony Kiedis and the bassist Flea.
Right. Yes, they had some rotating drummers and guitars. Although I think Chad Smith and John Frusciante, I think that's how his last name is pronounced. Frusciante. They've been with the band for 20 plus years, haven't they?
Well, Frusciante started there when he was 18, and like they got. I think if I remember, this was maybe his first album, and like this album exploded, and he like freaked out and disappeared, and then came back later.
That's right. Well, so I was a fan of the Chili Peppers from the very early days. The albums that no one bought, the like Freaky Styley, their second album produced by George Clinton, was like constantly on my turntable, and then after that the Uplift Mofo Party Plan. It was, I loved the combination of funk and punk, and I actually saw them in my little college town. They played at a country bar, like on the outside, just at the outside of town. And, like the cool alternative kids, they knew who they were.
Right.
This was literally, they only had 2 albums out, but they lit the place up. It was fantastic.
Yeah, this is like the Bob's Country Bunker of the town.
It was, yeah. And this was the, and this was the original 4 members of the band too. So, when Blood Sugar Sex Magic was released in 1991, and I'm a fan of it, but those of us who had kind of been fans for, 6 years, we were like, okay, mainstream, hello, here they go.
I really liked Mother's Milk.
I like Mother's Milk.
I happened upon Mother's Milk in high school, and I was like, this album is great. And I think the reason, again, Todd, the influence of MTV, on Mother's Milk, they did a cover of Higher Ground, and they made a video for that. And I remember seeing that video, because that video, just like their version of that song, is very frenetic and just a lot of eye candy, just very crazy. And I was, cameras swooping in and out over them as they're performing and all this stuff. It's almost like a cartoon or something. And I was like, who are these people? And growing up skateboarding, I'd kind of heard of them and everything like that. But that was really, in my mind, Mother's Milk, because I think that was like on Warner Brothers. Like that was kind of, I think, their first major label album, maybe. I can't remember. But I that was when
I think it was the one that broke them.
Yeah.
I think that was the one that broke them, because I'm trying to remember, but I think Give It Away was on that one. So
no, Give It Away is on. Well, I think Give It Away is on this one, on Blood Sugar.
Is it on Blood Sugar Sex Magic?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there was a hit on Mother's Milk, but it was, that sort of funk and roll stuff. I was digging that.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of a quiz here. All right. Okay, so I will give you, the year 1991.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you the day, like the actual September 24th. Okay. So this album was huge, as we talked about. Like, it was really hit with, it's like a multi-Grammy, kind of album, whatever. But it had the misfortune of being released on exactly the same day as another album on a different label. That ended up being even bigger. Can you guess what that album is?
1991, Octung Baby by U2.
I like that idea, but no, it's bigger than that.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Not sure what Mariah Carey was releasing back then. So
you don't need to lie for the listeners,
Okay. I mean, there were so many
Do you want a hint?
Bigger.
Can I give you a hint?
Yeah, give me a hint.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Was that when Nevermind was released?
Same day. So it's
Same day.
imagine if you're
the
planning
Chili
to
Peppers
release
were
this
like, "Damn
album and you put all this marketing, you put all this stuff into it, and then out of left field, this other album comes in and blows up what you're. So again, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were also standing in the long shadow of Nirvana. Inadvertently, like they gave it their best shot, but they couldn't escape it,
did.
right?
They did.
Okay, so let's talk about this album for a minute.
Okay.
Obviously, we know it ended well for the Red Hot Chili Peppers ultimately. So why is this album iconic? So this was the first album of theirs produced with the help of Rick Rubin. So you like Rick Rubin, I like Rick Rubin, the Beastie Boys and countless other bands like Rick Rubin. And it's seen as the band's best album overall. So its popularity was and is very widespread. So we have Breaking the Girl, Give It Away, Suck My Kiss, Under the Bridge, like all of these songs that are really part of the Chili Peppers canon are all
radio
on this
standards.
One album. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, this album design is an amazing encapsulation of the band and the songs. So keep in mind that this album came out long before websites and social media.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from seeing a band live, like I was mentioning earlier, you saw videos or interviews on MTV, maybe you read articles or interviews in magazines, and maybe you heard something on commercial radio, especially if the band rolled through your town, right?
Right.
So a lot of the photos in the liner notes sort of prefigured Instagram.
Huh. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. There were a lot of stylistically different kind of approaches to photography and things like that you might see in someone's Instagram feed now.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So like our jazz albums we love, the artwork on the front cover is really, quote-unquote, two colors of black and red. And obviously, given the band's name, you got to put red in there. Otherwise, it'll sort of be a little bit of a question mark, I think. And then each band member is shot in profile with their mouths open and their tongues sticking out, except their tongues are actually these sort of thorny Celtic-style pieces of art that weave into one another, surrounding a red rose in the middle. And then there are 4 more red flowers, one in each of the 4 corners of the cover. So very elaborate design.
Mm-hmm.
And then the band's name and album title are very minimal and paired off with one word from the band name paired with one word from the album title, like interwoven.
Oh, okay.
So the title is printed in metallic silver. Okay, so I sort of lied about the 2-color thing.
Okay.
So really there's metallic silver as an accent here, but it works.
It works. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And it really showcases the personalities of the band. And Todd, in a throwback to one of our very first episodes, this album art really reminds me of the Rock and Roll Over art album by Kiss.
Oh, yeah, where you can rotate it.
Yeah.
And each member is a star, right?
Yeah, so 4 members in the band. There's no true right side up for the artwork, or at least there isn't once you remove that pesky parental advisory label. So thanks, Tipper, for screwing that art all up.
And by the way, okay, I got a really quick, I know you're a master of trivia, but do you know what inspired Tipper Gore to start the Parental Advisory Council?
Oh, I forget.
It's a song. It is a particular song. Okay, all right, my favorite artist.
Prince.
Right, okay. What would, I'm trying to give you one other hint.
Yeah.
Did you ever know a girl named Nikki, by the way?
I vaguely.
You know what she did in a hotel lobby?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, Tipper heard her daughter listening to that and was like, what?
I love it. This is great.
So you can thank Prince for the PMRC advisory label.
It was great because he was probably like, huh?
He's like, I don't care.
Did any of his... Did his artwork was ever violated by the label? Like, I'm trying to remember Prince album, was it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right.
After Darling Nikki, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know the year it came out, but it was around that time, right?
Okay.
The early 90s.
You're more of the student of Prince than I am, so I'll take your word for it.
she heard her young daughters listening to Darling Nikki, and
that's great.
Was like, parents should be warned of this. And next thing you know, Dee Snider from Twisted Sister is in the, talking to Congress.
Yeah.
So anyway,
absolutely.
I'm sorry. Let's get back on track with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Though.
Oh, is that? I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Is that what we were talking about?
Sure. Let's get back there.
Okay.
All right. So the back of the album is this ballpoint pen like calligraphic handwritten list of all the tracks. Surrounded by a photo of Kiedis's tattooed forearm showing the Chili Peppers trademark asterisk symbol. And this is a great contrast to the clean and bold Franklin Gothic typeface used everywhere else, right? So very spontaneous, very jazz, kind of strong imagery and playing these elements off one another, I think.
Interesting. So, even though I was a fan of the Chili Peppers, and like I said, when this came out, those of us that were fans of the earlier rawer funk stuff, we thought it was a little mainstream, but I don't really know much about the story behind this, the backstory of this album. Do you know of anything of interest on that?
Yeah, so the backstory about this album. So again, early 90s, during this time, pop music was really hair metal, right? And hair metal with, with Nirvana and everything. Hair metal was suddenly out and flannel and Doc Martens were in.
Yeah.
Tattoos were still underground, but bubbling to the surface, and the shirtless Chili Peppers weren't bashful about their body art. They were never, among other things. Now, you never see a tube sock in quite the same way again.
That's right. Check out the EP Abbey Road by the Chili Peppers.
Okay, so there was this cat, this Dutch artist, Henk Schiffmacher. And I love his nickname, Hanky Panky.
I like that.
Yeah, this is great. So Hanky Panky, should I say Mr. Panky?
Mr. Panky.
Yeah, he was like sort of like Reservoir Dogs or something. He was Kiedis's tattoo artist and crafted the rose and thorn design for the front cover. So I kind of like this idea of bridging, the album art with literally the art on bodies of the band members here. And Mr. Panky describes himself, you'll love this, is great. He describes himself on his website as follows, quote, Henk Schiffmacher is a tattoo artist, painter, writer, collector, world traveler. You can see immediately from this list it is impossible to briefly summarize either the profession or the activities of this creative and cultural gadfly, nor is it simple to compile a record of service, a so-called curriculum vitae. Close quote. So this dude's a character. Kind of reminds me of the collage artist who did all the Dead Kennedys work, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So funny.
And if you use the word gadfly, I'm immediately
this guy's self-described, right? This isn't a third party. And he also,
that's right.
Again, this is a guy, his first language isn't English, and he talks about his curriculum vitae, his CV, which, yes, I know it's Latin, but whatever. Okay.
Yeah, he's mastered it, though.
Yeah, it was great. I love it so much. It was great. So the inside photos, so going back to this idea of Instagram and this idea of these like vignette photos, the inside photos of the band are in more candid moments, and there are these crop shots of their various tattoos. They were taken by, here's another guy, another pop culture intersection. They were taken by the film director Gus Van Sant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the Good Will Hunting guy. And he also worked with them on their videos.
Huh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. So they did have a lot going on with that, didn't they? So what, in all of these, what are the takeaways that we can gather from this period?
You mean aside from the fact that I store all my music rather well, and so it's still in pristine,
hermetically sealed,
yeah, climate control.
A vault.
That's right. It's in the same vault as Walt Disney's head.
That's right. You're a cultural gadfly as well.
I am. That's part of my CV. Okay, so the first point here. This is an era when music started to go big again, I think. This was Lollapalooza time, right? The early 90s. You had things like amazing gig posters for shows, and you had all of these music magazines. And in our next episode, we'll start to talk about all of the different music magazines that were around.
Yeah. So, and I know you said we weren't really talking about Nevermind too much in this, but
Right.
we've mentioned how much it's influenced so many different people. And I would say that strong interest in music and gig posters and the art of music, Nirvana made us interested in that again.
Yeah, I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is great design. Sure, we didn't have the size of the vinyl album. Everything had been shrunk into CD size. But we also had something far more interesting than the thumbnail you typically find on a phone now, right? And I think that size limitation, vinyl was still fresh enough in people's minds that I think that's what led to these gig posters, these other souvenirs, and these other forms of artistic expression.
Okay. Hey, do you remember when Apple tried to make the animated album art booklets for iTunes?
Yeah, that didn't really go over that
How'd
well.
You gotta love the idea.
Yeah, turns out people actually sometimes just want physical stuff.
That's right. They want to hold it. All right. Do you have one more takeaway?
Yes, variety. There were
Okay.
all kinds of record labels and bands with all different types of design approaches. And it was such a blast going to record stores and flipping through the used CD bins. And I will freely admit, I bought an album or two based on the design alone. And
Yeah,
I've
of
done that
course.
with books as well. Am I a sucker? Oh, maybe.
Well, yeah, join the sucker club, man. They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but doesn't mean you can't buy it for its cover, right?
That's true. That's
I mean,
true.
there's a reason designers do what designers do. It's
Exactly.
to get people to kind of understand the content and kind of a quick flash thing.
Yeah. Oh, I have been lured onto the rocks more than once by the siren
Oh
song.
man, me too. Me too. I know you and I were big electronica fans in the earlier days of that, and I bought so many CDs based on the covers because they really put a lot of attention to it and just the extra stuff, the extra production value of it.
Definitely.
Hey, by the way, it looks like the band's about to start.
Oh, okay. I guess that's our cue to exit. Well,
All right.
I just finished my drink anyway, and there's no more snack mix.
Wait, don't we have a tab we need to cover here?
I'm sure you'll figure it out.
All right. We'll see everyone next time when we talk a little bit more about Gen X, right, Elliot?
Absolutely. Yep, we have one more episode to go about some of our favorite magazines.